It's time for St. Francis of Maxwell to preach to us about how racist America is. Oh, he can see it from his Scottish ginger perspective. He has a video titled, "The System Works If You're a White Officer." And yes, it's race baiting, and yes, it's virtue signaling, and yes, it's a clueless 20-something-year-old trying to teach us something while hyping up his Instagram. Let's watch.
He released Rosfeld on a $250,000 unsecured bond. Now that means Rosfeld, as you heard, did not have to put up any money for his release. There was no question in my mind the defendant was not a flight risk.
Meek Mill's case has denied his request for bail. The judge, Ginny Sprinkley, says that he's a flight risk and he is a danger to the community.
How many Americas are there again? Oh, that's right, there's two. One in which...
Francis, you snot-nosed, spittle-faced There are two Americas when you want there to be two Americas, when you line that up to be the case. It's manufactured. It's fabricated. It's like saying there are two fruits, apples and oranges. Really? Okay, what? Are there? Yeah, there's two fruits. Here's the graphic. Two fruits. Apples. You could either be an apple or an orange. I think there's more than two. I don't think... What's the point of this? Yeah, you got a white police officer. Why did you say that he was white? Very interesting. This monkey-ass loser has the audacity to offer up to you the following cherry-picked comparison. They're talking about the officer who shot the guy who just did a drive-by, Antoine Rose. Or, sorry, he didn't do the drive-by. That was the guy in the back seat. He was in the front seat with a gun. He was riding shotgun during a drive-by. That guy got shot by a white police officer, not just a regular police, white. Keep that in mind, white. The guy was a white guy. He's going to take a police officer, highlight that he was white, which is, I don't know what the relevance of that is, but we know that he's trying to say fuck whites, whites are racist, and then compare the fact that this guy gets out on bail, by the way, is being charged with murder, so he's going to trial for murder as a police officer, but this first-time offender with zero criminal history and as a cop gets let out on bail. Meanwhile, he plucks an example of a black guy, imagine the odds, a black guy who was put in jail, not given bail. Well, Devin, I mean, that is just a slam dunk. How could you refute that? One case, the white guy was given bail. The other case, the black guy wasn't given bail. So let's look at this logically. Let's look at this like it's an IQ test. What are the differences between these two cases that can explain why there was a different outcome? Well, let's see. In both cases, there were criminal charges. Okay, yeah. Were they the same criminal charge? No. Okay, well, that's a difference, but okay, let's pretend that was even. Let's pretend it was the same criminal charge. One was let out on bail, one wasn't. Okay, shit, wonder what the reason is. Oh, I know. One was black, one was white. Oh! Well, that explains it then, doesn't it? That's racism. There's no other reason why this guy was let out on bail, this guy wasn't, aside from the color of their skin. What a simpleton you are, Francis. What a repugnant shit you are. Attempting to rile up racial tension and profiting off your fucking Cold War race war? Fuck you, Francis.
One in which a white police officer named Michael Rosfeld can face homicide charges for shooting an unarmed black teen 3 times in the back, only to be released without having to pay a single damn penny in bail. But in the other America, the one where the racist justice system is programmed to cripple people of color, you all remember Meek Mill, right? The rapper sent back to jail for violating parole? Yeah, he was denied bond for popping a wheelie in the same state.
The case of Meek Mill, which you brought up, the black rapper, the blapper, it wasn't he popped a wheelie and wasn't let out on bail. Him popping that wheelie, which was reckless endangerment, and he was not allowed to do that. He was in violation of the law when he was doing that on the streets of New York. It was the fact that that was at the tail end of a frigging massive list of other crimes and parole violations that he had done. To call him a repeat offender is an insult to the word repeat. So you're telling me that a police officer who is being charged with murder and is going to go to trial, but without a criminal record, is the same as a dude who is a multiple-time felon who is a repeat offender? Is that what you're telling me? And you're telling me the only difference is the race? This is stupid on 100 levels.
One in which a white police officer named Michael Rosfeld can face homicide charges for shooting an unarmed black teen 3 times in the back.
He wasn't unarmed, he had a gun. He left it in the car. but there was every reason to believe that those two dudes just did a drive-by, which they did, and the guy is going to trial for murder.
Back, only to be released without having to pay a single damn penny in bail.
He's not being released. He's not set back free. He goes to trial.
But in the other America, the one where the racist justice system is programmed to cripple people of color, you all remember Meek Mill, right?
No, I don't. I don't care about Meek Mill, and I don't. Okay, so Francis, let's just think outside the box. Do you think there are cases where black people get bail? I mean, doesn't that kind of just explode this point you're trying to make? How about a situation where a white guy doesn't get bail? Can we possibly do some research? Do you think that's ever happened, Francis? It kind of puts a little bit of scrutiny on your "this is racism" argument, doesn't it?
The rapper sent back to jail for violating parole, yet he was denied bond for popping a wheelie in the same state.
No, it wasn't for popping a wheelie. It was for his egregious refusal to abide by the parole restrictions placed upon him by the judge, who has been lenient with that dude for his whole life. The same judge, this guy goes before the same judge almost every time. And that judge is like, Meek Mill, what the fuck are you doing back in my courthouse? It's not for popping the wheelie.
The rapper sent back to jail for violating parole, yet he was denied bond for popping a wheelie in the same state.
It's the same state, y'all. The same state? Let's take a look at Meek Mill. Here's a Rolling Stone article, Meek Mill's Legal Troubles, a History. Well, Jesus, look at that mugshot. Looks like he has some trouble with striking defense. Might want to put your hands up and tuck in your chin. 2001, Meek begins rapping publicly. Good for him. Meek joins the Bloodhounds. Okay, sounds troubling. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so we should do it like they do on the... Okay. 2007, Meek Mill is accused of selling crack. Member of a Philadelphia's narcotic field unit, Reggie Graham claims to have seen Meek sell crack to an informant. However, the rapper and three of his cousins, dispute the accusations since they say Meek was in a courtroom supporting his cousin who was on trial. Yeah, he didn't do nothing. That wasn't Meek selling... No, what? He only raps about selling crack. But actually selling crack? No, he didn't do that. The following day, Meek is arrested for selling crack. After the police obtained a warrant to search Meek's house, the officers handcuffed him outside his home. Meek has said in the past that he was on his way to a corner store. He'd been carrying a gun at the time, but he says he ditched it. Graham later claimed that Meek had pointed the gun at him. During the violent bust, in which the police allegedly used Meek's head as a battering ram to open the door, they found about $30,000 that belonged to his cousin, William Bailey, who sold weed. Meek spends several months in the county prison. Okay, so we got drug dealing, pointing guns at people, he's arrested. Guy's up to no good. Great. Popping a wheelie, was it, Francis? Next year, 2008, Meek is found guilty of a gun charge. Yep. Meek faced 19 counts when he finally goes before Judge Guinness Brinkley for the first time. He waived a jury trial because of the costs, with Brinkley acquitting his co-defendants. She then found him guilty of 7 charges, 4 of which concerned the gun. The misdemeanor offense of illegal carry typically warrants a fine and house arrest. The rapper got 2 years in the county prison and 8 years of probation. Okay, so 2008, he's found with a gun. This is not his first offense. He's given probation. He's given time in jail. 2008, he drops a mixtape. Then he releases some other album. Then he signs a management deal in 2009. Then Rick Ross gets up in his grill, wants to record with him, drops another mixtape in 2011. So his career is taking off, right? Okay. Then in 2012, Meek is arrested for suspected marijuana use, but later released. Suspected. I suspect as well. While en route to the airport, police pulled him over because of his window tints and claimed they smelled weed in his car. He was later released. Then in 2012, he faces a violation of probation hearing. Brinkley charged Meek with violating his probation and ordered 2 drug tests, both of which turned out to be clean. She nevertheless blocks Meek from touring. So I've explained this to people before. The second you are an offender and into the criminal justice system, the judges are there to try to correct your behavior, and they find it extremely obnoxious when you repeat offend. They are giving you a chance to play it straight, to not commit crimes. When you do commit crimes, they get pissed, and they will ramp up their punishment of you. In December of 2012, Meek violates parole again. Judge Brinkley grounds Meek for the holiday after the rapper continues to book concerts while on restricted travel. So he doesn't respect the court's authority. He's not allowed to travel and do shows. This is a violation of his parole. 2013, Meek is ordered to take etiquette courses. Okay. 2014, Meek gets 3 to 6 months. At a probation hearing, Brinkley handed the jail stint down to the rapper after he failed to get the judge's permission to travel for concerts. The judge referenced a drug test where Meek tested positive for Percocet. which he'd started using after he'd gotten his wisdom teeth pulled. He later sought treatment and recovered. She also scolded him for tweeting negative things about his probation officer and prosecutor, for giving the officer a bad phone number and supposedly being combative and disrespectful to probation staffers. He'd also posed for a Facebook photo holding a gun. Okay, so they're like, look, you're going to be a dick. You're going to publicly insult your probation officers and the prosecutors, and you're going to flaunt in our face that you're pro-gun and that you're like, I mean, there will be consequences, and that's what the law is for, and that's what this judge is for. 2015, Meek is legally grounded again. Brinkley bars Meek from performing and recording until February over parole violations. Okay, these are the consequences of his actions. He still doesn't play ball. 2016, Meek gets 90 days of house arrest and community service. After a 4.5-hour hearing that included several passionate testimonies in Meek's favor, Brinkley required the rapper to wear an ankle bracelet and barred him from recording and performing over a supposed probation violation. Meek told the court he planned to get more life coaching, and that he felt bad for embarrassing his probation officer and the court. Quote, "I believe I can be the bright star you expect me to be," he told the judge. Nevertheless, she sentenced him to 6 more years of probation. His house arrest ends in June. So his career continues, but in 2017, Meek is charged with misdemeanor assault in a St. Louis airport. After an airport employee attempted to take a picture with the rapper, a fight broke out, leading authorities to arrest Meek and 2 airport employees. That case was later thrown out. Then Meek is sued by a family of a fan who died at a concert. Okay. And then, finally, in 2017, Meek pops wheelies on Instagram and is fingered by NYPD. While in New York for an appearance on The Tonight Show, Meek saw some kids riding dirt bikes and asked if he could ride one. His cameraman captured him popping wheelies without wearing a helmet on Instagram Live, and the next day, the NYPD stopped him, arresting him for felony count of reckless endangerment. The charge was later reduced to a misdemeanor and later dismissed. Brinkley later charged him with breaking probation and kept him from traveling. So that's that same judge. So in November, Meek goes to prison for probation violations. Not for popping a wheelie, for violating his probation. Brinkley decided to jail Meek for 2 to 4 years after he failed a drug test. The Washington Post reports it was for Percocet and did not comply with the court order that limited his travel, again ignoring what the court has said in terms of his travel. His lawyer said that Meek had been off drugs since January and that he'd been cooperative with most probation requirements. They vowed to appeal the decision. Oh, with most of the requirements, huh? What a stellar argument that is. You gotta do all of them, not most. So that is the story of Meek Mill and his continued violation of his parole. And somehow Francis thinks that that is a useful thing to compare to a police officer with no criminal record who was in the process of doing his job, engaging with gangsters who were armed and who had just done a drive-by. And he is going to trial for that. What a fucking absurdity.
That's where you get the likes of Khalif Browder, who you remember was falsely accused of stealing a backpack.
Why would you say falsely accused? He did steal the backpack. I mean, there is evidence to suggest that he did. As in the guy who got jacked and had his backpack stolen said, that's the guy who did it. Pointed him out and said, this dude stole my shit. But I guess falsely accused? How? How do you figure?
And spent 3 years in prison in Rikers Island, some of that time in solitary confinement.
Yeah, oh my God. So this story of Khalif Brown is popularized because somebody did a documentary about it. And Khalif made the rounds. And he was like, oh, poor me, I got mistreated at Rikers. And he's a product of the system. Didn't do nothing, gets sent to Rikers, ends up in solitary confinement, and oh, the prison guards were mean and nasty to him, ended up getting psychologically traumatized, ended up killing himself. Khalif killed himself, he hung himself. Well, the reason he was in solitary confinement was because he was fighting dudes in prison. Now, we understand prison is a rough place, but Khalif wasn't doing nothing in prison. He earned his trips to solitary. And he wasn't sent to Rikers for no reason.
When he faced the theft charges, his bail was set at $3,000 initially, which his family struggled but then managed to raise enough to pay for. But of course, in that America, it doesn't matter because the judge later changed his mind and decided to deny bail altogether.
Let me correct you there, St. Francis. Bail was set at $3,000, yeah. And do you understand how bail works? You don't have to pay that full amount. You could get what they call a bail bondsman, who will front that money for you, and they'll take a fee for their service if you give them a certain amount of money. Meaning, so here, with a bail bondsman, the amount might have been $900, but Browder's family could not raise this amount. So he was imprisoned at Rikers Island. And the reason was, let's go into it. I mean, if you want to get technical, you're on a big news show, the biggest news show on the internet. And who am I? I'm a guy in a bedroom in Buenos Aires. But I can read, and I have a fucking mind. So I guess I'll use that. Here's why he was arrested. In 2010, Browder and a friend were apprehended by police on Arthur Avenue near East 186th Street in the Bronx. Browder said he was on his way home from a party. He thought the police were carrying out a routine stop and frisk. He had undergone this police procedure on a number of occasions. Police officers were responding to a 911 call placed by Roberto Bautista, a Mexican immigrant, about the theft of a backpack containing a camera, $700, a credit card, and an iPod Touch. In his call, Bautista said 2 male black guys, they took my brother's book bag. Browder said to the attending police officers, I did not rob anyone. You can check my pockets. The police searched Browder, but they did not find the backpack. In his pockets, they didn't find the backpack? Well, here's just an incredible theory. The robbery happened 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, 2 weeks later, when he was out at a party, he didn't have the stolen loot. Bautista was sitting in the backseat of the police car. He identified Browder and his friend as the thieves. What was that? He identified Browder and his friend as the thieves. He then said the theft had not taken place that night, but 2 weeks earlier. Bautista's testimony of the date of the theft varied between interviews. Probably a language barrier, I'm going to assume. I think he knows exactly when the theft was. I mean, Jesus Christ. Browder asked the officers, what am I being charged for? He said, I didn't do anything? Oh, nothing. Double negative, please. A police officer said to Browder, we're just going to take you into the precinct. Most likely you can go home. Browder and his friend were taken to the 48th Police Precinct Station. They were fingerprinted and kept in a holding cell for a few hours. Then they were taken to the Bronx County Criminal Court, where they were processed at the court's central booking. 17 hours after the arrest, Browder was interrogated by the police officer and a prosecutor. The following day, Browder was charged with robbery, grand larceny, and assault. As he was on probation, Browder was not released. So that's why he wasn't released, because of the probation. He had been arrested prior. I think it was some sort of a joyride. Yeah, he was charged with third-degree grand larceny. He had crashed a stolen bakery truck into a stationary car while joyriding. He pleaded guilty, and that's why he was put on probation. So he was on probation, and that's why he was not released. But at his arraignment, the charge given was second-degree robbery. Bail was set at $3,000. So he could have gotten out if he coughed up $3,000, or if he got a bail bondsman and dropped it to $900. Instead, he didn't, and that's why he was at Rikers. Not because he was black, but because of the reasons I just explained.
When he faced the theft charges, his bail was set at $3,000 initially, which his family struggled but then managed to raise enough to pay for. But of course, in that America, it doesn't matter, because the judge later changed his mind and decided to deny bail altogether.
Yeah, he didn't pay the bail, and he was in violation of his probation. And then once in jail, he was getting into fights and causing problems there.
So he was kept imprisoned in a literal hell on earth, and the end result, well, we all know what happened.
What? No. The end result? Again, that's him. That's Browder doing that. Man jailed as teen without conviction commits suicide. Yeah, he committed suicide. He had tried 5 times before. He tried in prison. And by the way, not mentioned here, the prison guard saved his life on multiple occasions. He tried to slit his wrist. He tried to tear his sheets and form a noose and hang himself. And the prison guards came in and saved his life. The dude had deep psychological problems. But after getting out of jail, he went and did interviews. They made a movie about him. He still killed himself. But that was him doing that. It's not the system's fault. I mean, it's probably not a picnic to be at Rikers. He tried to get therapy afterwards. It just didn't work out.
So let me ask you, in what world is someone who is falsely accused of theft sent to one of the most brutal prisons in the world?
What do you mean? That's the prison you go to if you commit a crime in that area. That's the prison. And falsely accused, why do you say that? They said, oh, there was no conviction. You guys, the reason there was no conviction, eventually, after years go by, is because Bautista, the Mexican immigrant, went back to Mexico. So he wasn't around to give testimony. So the case was dropped because of that fact, and that fact alone. In other words, these people moved on with their lives. Miguel Bautista is not going to fly to New York from Mexico on his own dime just to prolong the headache of the fact that he got jacked by 2 blacks in the Bronx years ago. So it's fascinating because a regressive shitlord like Francis, St. Francis of Maxwell, he takes the fact that, oh, it never was a conviction because the eyewitness was in Mexico, as he didn't do nothing. There wasn't a conviction, so I guess he's innocent. Absolutely retarded.
Resulting in years of torment to the point where he took his own life, while a man who committed homicide on camera is allowed to enjoy the comfort of his own home while he awaits trial.
First of all, committed homicide? No, he didn't. That's up for debate. That's why there is a trial. The comfort of his own home? Yeah, the comfort of his own home. Oh, but his name and face is out there, and his life is ruined, and he is receiving hate mail and death threats, etc., and he's up for murder. So yeah, all that white privilege. Bail. Bail doesn't apply to blacks, apparently.
Now I know, I'm well prepared that the race deflectors will respond with the different state, different rules to remove that discomfort they feel when faced with injustice.
Different state, different everything, Francis. Do you like how he's trying to coin the phrase race deflectors? So unless you're focused, hyper-focused on race and see the world through the lens of blacks are like this, whites are like this, everything's racist, we got to point it out. I got to tell people I'm not racist. Then you're called a race deflector. Fucking crazy. The race baiters, racist dipshit race baiters like Francis, are trying to accuse us of being the problem. Absurd.
So since you brought up rules, let's have a look at what the state of Pennsylvania's constitution says. If you're charged with a crime where the maximum sentence is life in prison, you are not entitled to bond. Well, that's interesting. I mean, it's written plain and simple. I wonder why the judge chose to handle this homicide with kid gloves.
Well, because he was a police officer doing his job. And he believed he had every reason to grant bail, that he was not a flight risk. So that judge judged the case according to his acquired wisdom as being a judge.
Let's look at what he had to say.
I'm not going to defend myself to anyone except to God and the president judge.
Okay.
Yeah, that is okay. A guy got bail. Deal with it.
How many times does white privilege have to slap people in the face before they realize this is exactly what the system is programmed to do?
I mean, what a fucking absurdity is this? If anything, you should call that cop privilege, that cops get treated differently than just average citizens or average criminals. Because cops work for the state. They work for the same system that the judges are part of. Now, you could say, oh, they shouldn't be treated any different. I think they should be. It makes perfect sense. I mean, whether you think they should be or not, they will be treated differently. Because that's the reality of how that works. They are on the same side in some respects. So if, let's say, a cop gets shot, cops are going to go try to find that guy who shot their friend. It's going to be personal. Now, do you think it's fair that they go after cop killers with a little more venom and rigor than they do anybody else? Maybe, maybe not, but that's the way it is, and it makes perfect sense. And you would do the same thing, by the way. Before you want to get all high and mighty, you do the same fucking thing. It's like saying, if someone assaults your mother, do you care more or less than if someone assaults someone else's mother? Oh, you can pretend to have an answer to that that's way virtuous, but you know in your heart that you care more when it happens to someone who's part of your group. And that's not white privilege, you fucking racist. That's cop privilege.
It's not broken because for something to be broken, it would have to have worked in the first place. But it's never worked, not for black and brown people in this country anyway. Countless Americans of color are held without bond for minor charges and forced to spend...
Meek Mill's decade-long probation shows how broken America's justice system is? No, it shows how broken Meek Mill is. If he'd stop violating his probation, maybe he'd get off.
long stretches of time behind bars before they're even given a chance to plead their case.
Oh, here comes some stats, guys. Look, some inequality here. And once again, easily explained away with two simple facts. A, black people commit way fucking more crimes. And B, black people are repeat offenders and violate their probation way more than whites who commit less crimes and are therefore far less likely to be repeat offenders breaking probation. Ta-da!
Meanwhile, officers like Rosfeld are protected and coddled despite facing a life sentence for killing a 17-year-old.
Coddled and protected? He's on trial for murder.
Meanwhile, officers like Rosfeld are protected and coddled despite facing a life sentence for killing a 17-year-old.
Killing a 17-year-old gangster who just did a drive-by.
Now, do I bring both of these examples to your attention because they represent similar cases? No, because there is no similarity here. There's video footage in one instance.
They're not similar in the slightest. Oh my God, look at this fucking tweet. What's that thing called again? White privilege? What a snarky little dick. He's comparing Khalif Browder to Michael Rosfeld? Okay, let's review. Let's go through the bullshit, shall we? Khalif Browder, falsely accused of theft. Incorrect. He was accurately accused of theft because he robbed a dude. Bail set at $3,000 and sent to Rikers. Yeah, seems very, very, very reasonable. Could have been out of jail with $900. Didn't do it. What is the problem with that? When family raised, what is your problem? What is your problem with bail set at $3,000? That's incredibly low. When family members raised enough money to pay bail, it was denied. It was denied because it was too late. Okay, why don't you talk to the judge and say, why was the bail denied? It's probably because you have a period of time to make bail, and past that point, it is not possible. Now, the reason could have been he was in violation of his probation. from his, remember that joyriding thing where he's smashing bakery cars into shit? Yeah, so maybe that's the reason. It's not because he was black. And imprisoned in Rikers for 3 years for a crime he didn't commit. What the First of all, he did commit the crime. Second of all, and what's your point? Yeah, people who are repeat offenders go to jail. Michael Rosfeld shot and killed an unarmed Antoine Rose. Okay, he was armed. He dropped the gun in the car. And yeah, he shot and killed a gangster who was resisting arrest. Correct. And he's up for charges. Charged with criminal homicide. Yeah, oh my God. White privilege. The man's charged with criminal homicide. Pennsylvania Constitution states no bond shall be assigned for a crime where life in prison is the maximum sentence. Okay, so granted unsecured bond and allowed to go home without paying a single dollar. Okay, so you have a problem with the judge? I mean, is that what you're saying? Is you're saying that this judge is racist? Because in his determination, he thought that this situation called for bail. I mean, do you think people are this dumb? How about I put up a picture of a white guy who wasn't given bail and a black guy who was? Is that reverse racism, Francis?
Now, do I bring both of these examples to your attention because they represent similar cases? No, because there is no similarity here. There's video footage in one instance of an officer with a past history of gross misconduct.
Doesn't have a past history of gross misconduct. That is an absurd statement and just false character assassination.
Shooting Antoine Rose in the back, while on the other, Khalif Browder was wrongfully accused of theft with no evidence of wrongdoing, but yet was handled.
No evidence of wrongdoing? The guy who was robbed said he did it. Pointed to his face and goes, this guy fucking robbed me. No evidence that he did it. Falsely accused. Eat shit, Francis.
But yet was handled with a level of severity you would expect for someone who had committed homicide on camera.
Handled with a level of severity? Francis, he could have been out of jail for $900.
We live in two Americas, but it's up to you whether you see that and do what you can to help shed light on it, or just ignore it and pretend we are all treated the same because you're treated well.
Because you're treated well. So do you hear that? Now you understand his audience. He's talking to other cucked out white guilt bitches like himself. So he's saying, because you're treated well. So he's not talking to some ghetto ass black dude in the Bronx. He's talking to white people. That's the audience of TYT. Young white dipshit liberals. And he's trying to guilt you, saying, oh, just because you're treated well doesn't mean that there's not another America where people aren't treated well. You know, like poor Khalif Browder, who robbed a dude, lied about it, violated his probation, and went to jail for it. I mean, can you imagine the injustice? Scramble the jets. What are we going to do about that injustice? Thief goes to jail? Fucking hell, what's next?
In May of 2010, 16-year-old Khalif Browder was walking home from a party in the Bronx when he was stopped by the police and arrested for robbery.
Okay, so now we're about to hear Huffington Post Live, where we have a black journalist talking to Khalif Browder himself. This is prior to when he killed himself, obviously. We're hearing one side of this story. We're not hearing from Miguel Batista, the guy who he robbed. We're not hearing from the cops involved. Nope, we're hearing Khalif's side of the story. And he's going to get his asshole kissed by this black guy because racism. Watch.
Rikers Island.
And by the way, it wasn't $10,000. It was $3,000, and he could have been out for $900.
With his family unable to make the $10,000 bail, he was hauled off to one of the toughest jails in the country, Rikers Island. He would then spend the next 3 years there locked up for a crime he never committed.
He did commit the crime.
In June of 2013, all the charges were dropped. So why did it take over 3 years for prosecutors to determine that they didn't have a case against Khalif?
Oh, because that's when Miguel Batista went back to Mexico, and so he wasn't around to give eyewitness testimony. That's why. That's why the charges were dropped.
Well, Khalif and his attorney, Paul Prestia, are here right now demanding answers. They join us at HuffPost Live. Welcome both to you.
Hello, Mark.
Imagine that. He's a nerd. He's a black nerd.
Khalif, I want to start right with you. What happened that night?
Well, that night I had came from a party on 3rd Avenue with some friends, and I was going home, and that's when I was stopped by police officers, and they had...
Imprisoned for 3 years without a conviction. Yet the final result was that there was no conviction because the dude wasn't there to testify. That's it. You got lucky. He's trying to claim that this is some injustice. No, this is bullshit. You should be thanking your fucking lucky stars that you're out of jail instead of killing yourself.
They was explaining to me that there was a guy in one of their police cars that was saying that I allegedly robbed them, and they had searched me, and the guy actually said, at first he said I robbed him and I didn't have anything on me. And that's
you
when...
say nothing, you mean no weapon and none of his property?
No weapon, no money, anything he said that I allegedly robbed him for. So the guy actually changed up his story and said that I actually tried to rob him, and then another police officer came and they said that that I robbed him 2 weeks prior, and then they said, we're going to take you to the precinct.
Yeah, this is just a misunderstanding. You robbed him 2 weeks prior. Miguel knows when he was robbed.
And most likely we're going to let you go home, and then I never went home. They took me to the precinct, and I was there.
So you go to the precinct, you're photographed, you get your mugshot, you get fingerprinted.
Yes.
And they told you that you could post bail.
Yes, that's correct.
$10,000.
Yeah.
No, it's 3.
Yes.
And of course.
I couldn't make that. My family couldn't pay it.
So you went to Rikers Island, and did they attempt? What was the next step? Did they try to get you an attorney, public defender? What happens there?
Well, my family tried to get me a tried to get me a lawyer, but my family was doing, they was going through some hard times at the time, so they couldn't post bail or either get me a lawyer. So I was handed a legal aid, a legal attorney. So after that, I had to leave my case in his hands. It wasn't the best choice, but it's the only choice I had.
Absolutely. Did you have a record going into this?
No.
That's a lie? That's a fucking lie. I'm eating some lemon cake, excuse me. Why are you lying, Khalif? Khalif, you know you lie. What are you talking about? I mean, he's committing a crime right now, perjury. On national TV, he's talking about, I didn't commit a crime. He's talking about, I had no record, I've never been arrested. What the fuck?
So had you been arrested before at all?
No.
So you hadn't been arrested, you had no convictions then. Obviously, if you hadn't been arrested, there's no conviction.
Right, didn't do nothing, and it just retroactively. Not only did I not do nothing right now, I've never done nothing. Or hold on, let me quadruple negative that. I've never not done nothing.
And you're in Rikers Island now, charged with, what were the formal charges against you?
Robbery in the second degree.
Robbery in the second degree, and no explanation is given to you. What did your attorney tell you?
No explanation. You robbed a guy. Here's the explanation. The guy you robbed came to us and he said you robbed him. There you go. Any questions?
When he saw this case.
Well, he actually told me, he just showed me the evidence that they supposedly had on me, which was the dude saying that I robbed him, his statement. And I told him I didn't do this. I don't know how I'm here. He said he's going to work on the case, but after a while, I just kept hearing the same thing from the whole 3 years, and I just learned to cope with just being in there, and that was rough. I already knew. After a while, I just gave up hope.
You know what's fucking crazy about this case? This fucking idiot, Khalif Browder, 74 days after his arrest in July 2010, Browder was brought before a judge at the Bronx County Hall of Justice. The grand jury indicted Browder on a charge of second-degree robbery. A second charge of punching and pushing Bautista was heard. Browder made a plea of not guilty. Browder's family went to a local bail bondsman about the new charge, but the posting of bail was denied due to Browder's prior violation of his probation. On December 10th, 2010, a potential trial date was made as prosecution and defense had submitted notices of readiness. So the legal system is slow. When you're in jail, it's rough, and your trial date gets pushed back a few months because these courts are backed up. It's not a quick process, ever. 285 days after his arrest on January 28th, 2011, Browder appeared in court. So this sucks. This is why not posting bail is a big deal, because he could have gone on with his life. Instead, he's sitting there in Rikers Island. And so 258 days later, yeah, that's a hellish experience in there. But this is not a race issue. This is the way the courts and the jails work. Now, here's where it gets annoying. The prosecution requested a deferment of proceedings. So they say, let's push this back. Browder's record shows on June 23rd, 2011, the people are not ready, request 1 week. Then in August, the people are not ready, request 1 day. Then November 4th, the people are not ready, prosecutor on trial, request 2 weeks. December 2nd, prosecutor on trial, requests January 3rd, 2012. So the trial date is getting pushed back and back. Now, I assume if he had a good lawyer, he could figure out a way to get his trial pushed up, or maybe make a case that he could get out on bail. But his publicly appointed attorney basically didn't do jack shit. Again, not racist. Again, that lawyer was probably black. There's a good chance the judge was black. It says here, Browder was offered a plea bargain of 3.5 years in prison if he pleaded guilty. In June 2012, this amount was reduced to 2.5 years. Browder declined the plea bargain. Okay, he declined it. Doesn't want to be in jail a day longer. And then a bunch more. People are not ready, request 1 week, request 2 weeks. Trial's getting pushed back. After 961 days in prison, Browder had appeared before 8 judges. Browder later said, these guys are just playing with my case. On March 13th, 2013, Browder appeared before a Brooklyn judge, Patricia DeMango. She offered Browder a plea bargain of immediate release. of immediate release for his admission of guilt to the 2 misdemeanors with consideration of time already served. Browder refused the offer and was returned to prison. Can you imagine that? And then on May 29th, a few months later, Domingo freed Browder in anticipation of the dismissal of the charges against him 1 week hence. Bautista had returned to Mexico and could not give testimony against Browder. So this trial that they've been pushing off and off and off was going to be pointless because there was no case against him because the dude, the eyewitness, had left the country. So the judge let him go. The judge was offering to let him go if he just admitted he was guilty. So the guy's talking about Rikers is hell, Rikers is hell. He was offered a chance to get out and he turned it down.
3 years is a long time. I mean, did you find it odd? I mean, that, you know, month after month is going by and there's no updates, there's no hearing, there's nothing. I mean, wasn't that strange? Even when you talk to other prisoners who were in there, I mean.
Yes. It was weird from the first day I was in there. From the first day they put the handcuffs on me, it was weird for me. I mean, because I knew I didn't do it, and then I don't know this dude, and then I know that I felt like the police wasn't conducting their job correct. So I knew from the first day I was in there that everything was wrong. But it was hard. Knowing that for the whole 3 years was very hard. And then it came to the point when they offered me time served. And that's when it really got real stressful for me, because being in there for about 33 months, and you miss everything about being home, the fresh air, your family, certain events. You want to be home, and then when they give you an offer to go home right then and there, it's like, I want to go home, but then you know you didn't do it, so you don't want to take the plea and say that you do it. It's not right.
Oh my God. So jail is horrible. Oh my God, it's terrible. I want to get out there. I want to breathe the fresh air, have freedom. But the second they offered to let me go, I said, nah, because I don't want to plead guilty to this thing. I mean, how petty, how prideful. Take the friggin' plea, get out.
So what happened is...
Let me set this up for our viewers, some who don't know the entire situation. After 33 months,
right.
They come to Khalif and offer him a deal where he would admit to committing the crime in exchange for a reduced sentence. And because he'd already served 33 months in Rikers Island, he would essentially have time served. In other words, he would go home having served his time for a crime that he would admit that he committed. As you're saying, that's a heck of a choice to
The easiest choice of all time.
make.
Yes.
You're sitting there saying, I know I didn't do this, but I want to go home. And
Yes.
you've already been sitting in prison for 3 years, and if you go take this to trial,
Yes.
you were facing a lot more than the 3 years you'd already served. You were
course.
facing up to what?
Up to 15 years.
Up to 15 years. So you had to choose between being in prison for up to 15 years and going home right then by admitting you did a crime you didn't do.
Makes it even more of an easy choice. Look, dude, you didn't post bail, you violated your parole, you probably robbed this dude, okay? You've spent a bunch of time in prison. You could just admit you did this, we'll let you go right now. Or stay in prison, go to trial for this thing, and potentially face up to 15 years. And he can't figure out what to do?
That's correct.
And I know you were the one who actually found him.
Yes, I was home alone with him, and we had a little discussion earlier, and I was at a loss as to what to do. I didn't know what to do, how to really, help him, because he became very paranoid.
Worried about getting beaten or attacked.
Yes, and I tried talking to him, so he went upstairs, and I was just laying on my bed, and he came in, he said, Ma, that was his thing. Ma, you all right? I said, yeah, I'm okay. He went back upstairs, and I hear all this moving, so I figured, he was in his brother's room, he's situating the room so he could get comfortable and watch TV. Then I hear him pacing from one room to the other, but when Khalif is upset, he paces. So I didn't pay attention. Then all of a sudden, I hear this loud noise, and I'm like, oh my goodness, a child and threw his brother's TV out the window. But I said, he can't because there's bars. So I said, wait a minute, I go upstairs, I went in his brother's room, nothing. Then I went in the other room, and he had kicked out the air conditioner covers, and I saw this gold rope thing, and I ran downstairs, and when I opened the backyard door, one of his feet was on the bar of the gate, and I said, Khalif, stop playing. This is not a joke, it's not funny. I said, Khalif, and then I got afraid to open the door all the way in case it was my fault that he snapped. But when I looked up, his head was just hanging back. he was gone. And that loud noise was his body banging up against the house.
He had been fighting for 5 years to proclaim his innocence. I can't tell you how sorry we all are for your loss, Vanita. I know we had mentioned it. Mayor de Blasio has spoken up and invoked Khalif's name. President Obama wrote about it in the Washington Post in banning solitary confinement for juveniles. Even Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy has talked about Khalif's case. And yet, to this day, you feel you've not heard an apology.
An apology from who? What are you talking about? So, look, if you want to turn this into a story of personal tragedy, this mother has lost a son. Khalif lost his life. He chose to kill himself. Yeah, it's all tragic. But to try to turn this into a racist thing, that's crazy. That's unacceptable. To try to say that there was some great injustice here, that's ridiculous and preposterous. Now, they're trying to talk about solitary confinement and the ramifications that that has on someone's psyche. And yeah, I'm sure it's fucked up. It's not supposed to be good for you. But what are you supposed to do to prisoners to punish them in prison? Like, he was acting up in prison, you understand. On October 20th, 2010, a gang member spat in Browder's face. Later in that day, Browder punched the gang leader and then was set upon by 15 gang members. After a fight with an inmate, Browder was put in solitary confinement for 2 weeks. He later said, "He was throwing shoes at people. I told him to stop. I actually took his sneaker and threw it, and he got mad. He swung on me and we started fighting." So, I mean, it's quite despicable to try to say that, I mean, they're working backwards here. It's such a bizarre thing for St. Francis to try to do this. Guy kills himself, tragic. Had mental problems, this was his choice, he checked out. Who should we blame? Let's blame Rikers, let's blame solitary confinement. Okay, well, Rikers is a prison. It's not really a mental health facility. Although they did help him when he did try to commit suicide. They saved his life multiple times and gave him counseling. That being said, Rikers is not a fun place, and yes, it's a terrible experience. So maybe he should have posted bail. Maybe he should have not violated his probation or robbed a dude. What is the target here? How are we finding someone to be mad at? Well, Francis found somebody. He found a white judge who let a white police officer out on bail. Now, millions of people are let out on bail every day of all colors, but Francis found this one, and he compared that one to this situation with Khalif Browder, which is very unique and specific to Khalif Browder. But Francis sees through it. Oh yeah, he understands white versus black. Two worlds, two Americas. Divided we stand, right, Francis? Fuck you. And thank God we have people like me pointing out and doing damage control on the racist propaganda that come out of these virtue signaling fucks. I got your back. If you want to have my back, hit me up on Patreon. Otherwise, have a good night.
I don't care if it hurts. I wanna have control. I want a perfect body. I want a perfect soul.
I want you to notice when I'm not around. You're so very special.
I wish I was special, but I'm a creep. I'm a widow.
What the hell am I doing here? When I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I don't belong here. What the fuck am I doing here? When I don't belong here.
She's running away. She's running. wish I was special.